Hey everyone, welcome back to the Direct to Video Connoisseur podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and coming up, we're going to be finishing off our DTVC Extra series look at the Kickboxer franchise. Then next week, Ty from Comeuppance is back on as we're going to look at two films with a Massachusetts theme. We're going to be looking at Hunting Games with CT from The Challenge, and then we're going to be looking at American Violence, which has Gronk, a former Patriots standout. Week after that, so 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be taking the week off from the podcast. I will be away from work there and kind of do like we did last time where I took a week off from the podcast between franchise looks. And then 2 weeks from then, we'll get back on just with a regular podcast. And then, I think, again, probably the next franchise we'll look at will be Expendable. So that'll be coming up here. As far as the site goes, I had originally planned to do Hard Hunted. That was my goal for this Saturday. But the thing is, I have to watch it again because it's been a while since I've seen it to do the review. Whereas Executive Target, a PM Entertainment flick with Michael Madsen, I've seen that one recently and can review it without having to watch it again. I think I might flip those two in the order then. So I might do Hard Hunted next week and Executive Target this week. After that, we've got Codename Vengeance and then Hard Target 2. Interesting, we'll be talking about Van Damme here, but we're going to be talking about another Van Damme sequel that he's not in, Hard Target 2. And that'll be coming up in a few weeks. So, again, as always, keep an eye out on the letterbox to see what I might be flipping or switching or changing things around. Because that list there is always subject to change. I have a pretty hefty to watch list as well, between podcast episodes that I've got coming up that I'm going to be recording, and watching those movies, and just things that I want to kind of see and get on the site here. So hopefully we'll start to catch that up, and that will probably change the letterbox list, the upcoming reviews watched section, which is where you can see that as well. Also planning to review hopefully this week a new film that Nathan Shepka sent over to me called Lock and Load. And so that is one that it's a screener one that I wanted to, Lock and Load. Did they call it Locked and Load? Lock and Load. Yeah, it's a screener one that he sent over. So Nathan Shepka, of course, he worked with Tom Jolliffe, who they've been on the site before. They're on the podcast before to talk about Baby in a Basket, which is their new film that they're working on, and that Kickstarter. So definitely, check out that. I would, if you've got some money, definitely, help crowdsource that film, because I really liked what they did with When Darkness Falls. That was another film that they did together. Really, really great work there. And so I'm excited to check out how Locked and Load went for them. So that'll be trying to get that one, and hopefully on Thursday I'll be doing that. And so hopefully kind of starting to work my way through some of these screeners that I have as well. But we'll see what happens there. That's kind of everything here. I know usually this early opening preamble thing goes like maybe 10 minutes, but I don't have a lot this week. So we'll get right in. Why don't we do the theme song here, and then we'll jump into the first film, which is Kickboxer Vengeance. All right, we are back, and we're getting ready to start our look at the two Kickboxer reboots, starting with Kickboxer Vengeance. So this film came out in 2016. So again, it had been about 20 years since the last Kickboxer installment. Originally, this Kickboxer installment, this reboot essentially of the Kickboxer franchise, it wasn't supposed to have Van Damme in it. It was supposed to have Tony Jaa playing the Xian character, the Dennis Chan character. And I guess when they weren't able to get him, they got Van Damme instead. And why don't we do a quick a quick synopsis, and then that we'll kind of get into what I thought of this one here. So what we have here, the movie starts with Alain Moussi as Kurt Sloan. He is going to where Tong Po, played by Dave Bautista, is training a bunch of fighters, and it's kind of an evil, ominous place. We find out he's there to try to kill Tong Po, and he's there to kill Tong Po because Tong Po killed his brother, played by the late Darren Shatlavi, Eric Sloan. Eric Sloan is convinced by Gina Carano, who's a fight promoter, dubious, evil fight promoter named Marcia, who convinces him to go out to Thailand and fight Tong Po in an underground fight, and Tong Po kills him. So at the same time that Moussi is trying to take out Tong Po, and he fails, of course, we find out that Sarah Malakul Lane, sorry, I mispronounced her name, who we've seen on the site before, in particular Shark Lake that she did with Dolph. But she is a police detective in Thailand who's been investigating Tong Po. And so she lets Moussi out of jail and has him go train or meet up with the guy and train the guy who trained his brother to fight Tong Po, played by Jean-Claude Van Damme. So now Van Damme is training him to fight Tong Po, and as he's training him, we find out the investigation is sort of, I guess Tong Po's into like drug dealing and things like that, all kinds of bad stuff that he's into. And so it's one of those things where, okay, should he fight him, not fight him? Sarah Malakul Lane has a romantic relationship with Alain Moussi, and then there's a sense of like, oh, you shouldn't fight Tong Po, he's too dangerous, he's too scary. Eventually he fights Tong Po, and he wins, right? Spoiler alert, right? He wins the fight. But yeah, so that is that one there. And I don't think this is a bad movie, right? It's a 90-minute movie, which 90 minutes is a nice runtime. It does kind of get you there. It does spin its wheels a bit with the whole training. There's a lot of training montages in this. We don't get the fun thong tank top dance scene, though we do get the bar scene. He does fight a guy in the bar, so that happens there. There's some particularly badass scenes from Moussi, which I really liked. Van Damme is fantastic in it. I think that's one of the problems for poor Moussi, is that Van Damme steals the show, and I don't even know that Van Damme even means to steal the show in this one. He's just because he is kind of low key, but he does steal the show, and it's one of the big differences, right, between the first Kickboxer and this one, is that Van Damme is by far the star of the first Kickboxer, right? Dennis Chan does not steal the show from Van Damme, whereas in this case, Van Damme does steal the show from him, and that does make it a little bit interesting. Also, we have Gina Carano, who is a great fighter, doesn't fight at all in the film. A little bit of a surprise there. It would have been nice to have seen her fight somebody, get into some kind of fight there, but that doesn't happen. Bautista as Tong Po, I think he's bad enough, right? It's definitely a kind of it is a good baddie turn there. It's hard though, right? Because we're so used to Michel Kisi as Tong Po, and even when Michel Kisi wasn't playing Tong Po in the fourth Kickboxer, it still was Tong. There's still a sense that it was that Tong Po. This is a different Tong Po, right? This is a different kind of person, or different kind of, I don't know. Yeah, it's a different thing there. There is some borrowing from Kickboxer 4, right? Because in the first Kickboxer, we didn't have a sense that Tong Po was... I think we had the sense that Tong Po was backed by criminal enterprises, but not that he was dealing drugs himself. I don't think so. Whereas this, he's sort of like the head of a criminal empire that's being taken down, which is more part 4, right, than it is part 1. So a few things going on there. In terms of where I rate this... I don't. It's definitely, for me, it's definitely not better than the first one. I don't put it above the first one. I think in terms of after part 4, because part 4 is my second favorite going into this, I still like part 4 better than this one. So then I guess you put it above part 5, right? Part 5 and then part 3, for me. We'll talk about the next one after, Retaliation after this. And so I don't want to walk over. I don't want to step on that conversation here and rate that one as well. But the other thing, too, of course, is looking at Alain Moussi, who's relatively new, right, when he's doing this role here. He's great martial arts, right? He's really, really great. He has, a lot of really, really great stunts that he does in this, and his martial arts are electric. I really liked it. So all that was really good. The problem is, right, he's part of a lineage that has really, really fantastic fighters, right? obviously Van Damme is the first kickboxer, who's fantastic. Mark Dacascos, right? Say what you want to say about the fifth Kickboxer movie. Mark Dacascos is electric and is one of the best in the business, one of the best to ever do it. And so that's another tough act to follow. So then you got Sasha Mitchell, right? And I could see maybe Moussi from a technical standpoint being better than Sasha Mitchell. There's something about Sasha Mitchell, especially when he's working with Albert Pyun, that really works for me. And I don't know that these films, from a director-actor standpoint with Moussi, work the way that those Pyun, Sasha Mitchell films work. And that's not really any comment on Moussi, right? I think Moussi from what do I want to say? I think Moussi from a potential standpoint, like he's got it, right? I think I don't think there is any real comparison between him and Sasha Mitchell in terms of martial arts and what they can do. Moussi shows like he's got insane talent in this film. I just think that from the collaboration standpoint between what Pyun and Sasha Mitchell, especially what they were able to do with Part 4, we haven't seen that yet. And who knows, maybe if we can get Moussi, connected with an Isaac Florentine or a Jesse V. Johnson, that maybe we do see, kind of that thing, that we're looking for there. It's an interesting thing. Now, one of the things I said in my review of this movie is there was almost a sense of like, what's the point? And I think that's a valid criticism, because you're waiting 20 years to reboot Kickboxer, right? Nobody's touched the franchise for 20 years. What are you going to do with it that's different, right? When you look at Universal Soldier, it wasn't quite 20 years that they had gone. I guess it had been like 15 or so. And they did some new things, especially, I think, I was trying to think like, out of those ones, what were kind of the big ones there that, those, because obviously like in 99, right, when Van Damme tries to take the franchise back over. So it's actually 10 years between 99's outing and then what was it called? Regeneration. I think when Hyams takes over, when they start to, I think 2009's Regeneration was not a great one either, right? It wasn't a great entry in the Universal Soldier franchise. It's not until we get Day of Reckoning 3 years later where you get some really great, like uncharted territory that they go into. You've got Dolph, Van Damme, and Scott Adkins giving really great performances there. These films, neither of these two films touch Day of Reckoning in that sense for me. There isn't that kind of, we're traveling over some new ground, we're trying some new things with this. That really doesn't happen here. The other problem for me with this movie is that the frame rate, or the edit rate, or it's so like rapid fire. Like a lot of shots barely sit for a minute. I'm sorry, not a minute. Barely sit for a second. It's just you're moving through one thing really quickly. And I think that's something for me that, when you compare, watching them back to back with these 90 films, I think that's another way to think of this, right? Is that most people were not watching all of the Kickboxers between, consecutively before they went to see this in 2016, right? A lot of times it had been 20 years since they'd seen a Kickboxer movie, and their minds, our minds had all been velocitized to the modern filmmaking style where you get these really quick edits and it's really hard to get your brain to focus on anything. I think this movie could have done with longer takes. I think it could have done with, if you're shooting action and you've got someone of the talent of Alain Moussi, somebody of the talent of Van Damme, and you're doing scenes with them, give us a kind of a wider shot and let us see a few things happen together, as opposed to, in some cases it would be like within one shot, right? One kick would have two edits and you'd see it two different ways, or see it, and it was hard to focus that. I think that's an issue for me that, like, I don't know. Yeah, that was it. It would be nice if we somehow got back to movies having longer cuts and us being able to focus on things a little bit longer. I think especially when we have the quality of martial artists that we're getting in these films, because it's not just L.M. Moussi and Van Damme, right? We also get George St. Pierre, who is one of my favorites. I've always been a big fan of George St. Pierre. I used to love watching him in the UFC. He was definitely one of my favorites there. And so seeing him in this, he was good here in this. I liked him. Darren Shahlavi, the late Darren Shahlavi, another really great martial artist who really only has like the one fight with Tong Po and he loses it. So we don't really get to see what he can do. I think I would have liked to have seen more of what he could do for sure. Gina Carano, again, and whatever we want to talk about Gina Carano now, and the fact that she's sort of gotten herself canceled, and we in this film she hadn't been canceled yet, right? And we could have afforded to see more from her in this, and and I don't know, like Sarah Malika Lane probably, I don't know what level of martial artist she is, but they could have doubled her with somebody else and had somebody else, fighting her. I think that would have been really cool to see something there with her, and we didn't get that either. But yeah, and I think that's another piece of this, right? Is that so many really great martial arts scenes, so many really great, really, really demonstrating what L.M. Moussi can do, but at the same time, really, really quick cuts that make it hard to focus on that. So yeah, so that's a piece there. This, again, this is one of the films that, it did get put in the box office, or was distributed in the box office, and it grossed $287,000 worldwide. And I don't know why it would not have made more. What caused that? I do think though that one thing was, I'm sure once this thing got into the theater, there are probably people that were like, okay, well, what is the what is there about this that makes me want to see it on the big screen, right? Really, right? The thing that I'd want to see is the original Kickboxer on the big screen. Like that would be something that would be exciting. This is, it's a direct-to-video movie, really, right? And at 90 minutes, kind of covering territory that we've seen however many times before. I think it does what you needed to do for a direct-to-video movie. I don't know that this necessarily needed to be shot, put in the theater. And so then I guess that begs the question, what does a Kickboxer reboot get us, right? Is it something that could get us a theatrical release? I don't know that that's a series that can do it. I think the first movie is the one that was, that had the theatrical success. I think from here on out, it is a direct-to-video franchise, and that's fine. I think, I'm okay with it being a direct. Obviously as a DTV connoisseur, right? I'm okay with the movie being direct-to-video, but I think, I know there's talk about another one of these coming. I know that they're wanting to make a third one, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get into the second of the two films, sort of where we see this franchise going. But I just, I don't know if the plan is to kind of put that third one in the theaters or not. I can't imagine that after the second one did, that they would want to do that, put it in the theater. But I'm curious. I'm going to be curious to see, kind of curious to see like what they keep doing with this, because I think, I don't know, it's interesting. I went into the whole last movie talking about how, in part 4, like, why didn't people do more with Kickboxer? And then, I see this movie and I'm like, well, maybe you did as much as you can do with Kickboxer. This is kind of what it is. And I mean, this movie could have been called anything. And it would have been a solid DTV. Any movie, could have been called anything and have Van Damme in it, right? And I would have reviewed it and said, hey, this is a really solid movie. It feels like a Kickboxer movie, but it's got some differences or something like that. Maybe that's where we're at. And I think that's a good enough synopsis of this movie, that it is just a solid DTV film that they tried in the theater. It didn't go anywhere, but at 90 minutes, I think you can get there, and I think it doesn't have that sort of the iconic feel to it that the first Kickboxer did, and maybe that's part of aging. That maybe what I see when I'm 10 years old, 1989. It's hard to match that and make it better or something like that, and maybe that's what I don't know. Maybe that's the issue. I mean, I think I would have liked, instead of a reboot, I think I would have liked some kind of continuation. If, again, I think I would have liked this better if, instead of Van Damme playing a guy named Durand, if he was playing himself. If I don't know if it's a matter of retconning the previous series and saying he was never really shot. The stories of his death were greatly exaggerated, but he's there. And then Alain Moussi is playing somebody else. Alain Moussi might be playing somebody new, right? And Darren Shahlavi is playing somebody new, and they're not Sloanes. Or, right, maybe that they're related to him, right? Maybe it's a cousin of, a Sloane cousin or something like that. And he goes out to Thailand and he learns to fight. I think I may have liked that better than a reboot. I think that might be the issue here. And again, not saying I don't like this movie. I did like this movie. I thought it was a solid DTV actioner. It did what it needed to do. So there's that there. One quick note, of course, there's a scene where our heroes are in jail. They've been arrested by Sarah Malakulain because she wants to protect Alain Moussi from fighting Tong Po. She doesn't want him to fight Tong Po. She figures if you arrest him, that'll do the trick. But they break themselves out so that he can fight Tong Po. And as they're exiting the jail, Michel Kisi is in the prison cell, and he says to Van Damme, "Hey, don't forget about me," and Van Damme just goes ahead and moves. I think it's "Don't forget about me." Is that it, or "You forgot about me"? Of course, I'm doing this in real time because I didn't write it down. I probably should have written it down, but yeah, "You forgot about me." It was "You forgot about me." Yeah, as they're escaping jail. I don't know. I will say, in terms of how a baddie, I think Tong Po I think Michel Kisi as Tong Po was better than Bautista. But, they liked the idea of having Bautista, right? You had a name, right? You had a name that you can attach to Marvel, right? That you can have as the baddie. But, yeah, Michel Kisi, I think it was kind of a more scary, frenetic, whereas, Bautista was kind of an understated, scary baddie. I don't think he was bad. I think when we get to the next film, we'll talk about kind of a one-note baddie that doesn't really work. Whereas this, he's good enough as the baddie. And I wouldn't have wanted him to be more developed or anything like that. Because again, I wouldn't want to add any more time to this film. 90 minutes is a good number. So, but yeah, just kind of a fun moment there that Michel Kisi is like, hey, you forgot about me. So. Yeah, so that's that. I don't really have much else for this one here. So I think what we'll do is we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and we will look at the final one in the series, Kickboxer Retaliation.
Hey, it's Matt from the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur here. Thanks again for listening to the DTVC podcast. Before we jump in, I wanted to quickly let you know that my new novel, A Girl and a Gun, is available on Amazon now, both on Kindle and paperback. It follows Justin, a successful writer whose past as a scriptwriter for a fetish porn site comes back to haunt him and threatens to derail his career. As he's picking up the pieces, he gets an opportunity to make a movie called A Girl and a Gun with a rom-com star. Justin may have bitten off more than he can chew, though, because she's notoriously difficult to work with. If you're interested, you can find the link on our webpage, along with the link to my first novel, Chad in Accounting. If you have any questions, please reach out, and I thank you for the support. Now, on to the podcast.
All right, we are back, and we are wrapping everything up with the final movie in the Kickboxer series, Kickboxer Retaliation. Came out in 2018. So this one, for me, was a bit of a rough set. It was 110 minutes long. So we are 10 minutes away from 2 hours here. So essentially what happens is Kurt Sloan, he becomes a professional fighter, wins a big UFC fight in Las Vegas, and then he's sedated and kidnapped and taken to a prison in Bangkok, where he's forced to fight this 6'10" giant guy for his freedom. But first he doesn't want to fight, right? First he doesn't want to take the fight, and they do various things to try to convince him to take the fight. Finally, the tried and true method, right, is to kidnap his girl. So Sarah Malakulain gets kidnapped, and now he's got to fight to save her. So he has this massively long fight. I want to say it was like over a half hour. That was just like his fight against the big giant guy. And the giant guy was essentially just any number of, ESPN2 World's Strongest Man kind of guys, right? You know what we're talking about, right? Those big guys, those big Norwegians that would like move like huge wheels, or like they would like put a rope like in their teeth and like tow a truck, that kind of thing. That's what we got here with our baddie. He's essentially that guy, and so I guess he's got to train to be able to fight somebody that big, right? Someone who can move wheels and massive like truck wheels, and can tow vehicles with his teeth and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if anybody watched those growing up. I mean, I used to watch those like because ESPN2. I would watch ESPN2 all the time, and it would had all kinds of stuff like that. And but yeah, World's Strongest Man, that was a big one that you had there. Other big names in this. There are all kinds of people that were in this movie. So Van Damme is back as Duran. He gets blinded. And he gets blinded by the baddie, who's played by Christopher Lambert. So Christopher Lambert, he's kind of like the Cary Tagawa from the second movie. He's kind of like that person who's like this, person who's like putting together all these fights or whatever. But like the big thing is that he's the one who kidnaps, Moussi. He's got all these people in the prison, right? So Van Damme's in the prison. Mike Tyson is in the prison. We get Roy Big Country Nelson there. Ronaldinho. I don't know if you remember Ronaldinho, standout Brazilian soccer star. He's in the prison, which was just fantastic. I don't know if you remember. I mean, Ronaldinho, I remember playing FIFA with him. And I mean, even like the later FIFAs, you had to watch out for Ronaldinho. Like when Ronaldinho, when he was done with Barcelona and he was playing with AC Milan, man, he could still, crack it in the upper 90 from deep. And it was like, in real life, he wasn't really doing that, but yeah, in the game, yeah, he was going to do that to you. So, good to see him though. I mean, I was a big fan of him. Other people, have Mauricio Shogun Hua, Philippe Verdun, just. Yeah, all kinds of names in there. The Gracie, Enzo Gracie, Ronaldo Sobral, Frankie Edgar, Vanderlei Silva. Just all kinds of names that pop up in this. Also, an interesting name. We have Kamal Krifa, who, if you may remember from the last episode, right? He plays Tong Po in the fourth the fourth movie of the series. So he's in there. But yeah, what we get with this movie. It is essentially Bloodsport 2, right? This movie is 110 minutes of Bloodsport 2, with the only difference being that we also have Christopher Lambert is essentially playing the Ben Franklin role from Bloodsport 4. That's what we have there. It is interesting, too, because I think he has like really serious vision problems, so it's interesting that he blinded Van Damme when he himself is almost blind. So that's an interesting piece of this. And, seeing Van Damme in here was kind of cool, too. Seeing Lambert in here was kind of cool as well, just because I've always been a fan of him. Obviously, he's a direct-to-video connoisseur, Hall of Famer. We don't see him as much because he doesn't always do direct-to-video stuff anymore. A lot of times he's doing foreign films. He was in the movie Hail Caesar, that the Coen brothers did. He was in that. So he does a lot of bigger stuff. But yeah, it was kind of fun to see him here. Another one that I liked him in was Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. So anytime we can see Lambert, and he's a great baddie. One thing I was disappointed in was that he and Van Damme had some scenes together. I really would have liked to see them speak in French to each other. Being that they're both French speakers. I mean, I guess Alain Moussi is probably also a French speaker. So yeah, we could have had a lot more French in these movies that we didn't get, which is too bad. Again, if we're gonna make it an extra we're gonna make the movie almost 2 hours long. Why not just have some French in there and make that work. The other thing for me, of course, with this is that, again, we're essentially just remaking Bloodsport 2, but we're doing it for 2 hours. The baddie really doesn't bring anything, right? I would put this baddie on par with Ian Jacklin's baddie in the third movie, right? And one of the things that made Van Damme movies so spectacular in the late 80s, early 90s, as much as Van Damme made them spectacular, were the baddies, right? So, obviously Tong Po is a great baddie. Bolo Yeung, is a great baddie a couple times. Lance Henriksen is fun as a baddie. I mean, we had some really good ones in there. You could mention Raul Julia, too, if you want, from Street Fighter. This was just like, hey, this guy's really big. And the fight scene went on forever. And not only was it like a fight scene that went on forever, but it wasn't really well choreographed from my standpoint. It was really just two people punching each other and spitting Hawaiian Punch out. As I said in my review, the Hawaiian Punch budget must have been massive for this. And we talked about Pyun doing, potentially doing sequels with Sasha Mitchell before he passed. I would say the Hawaiian Punch budget on this film was probably higher than what Pyun would be getting for one of those movies. But that's really what you get there a lot. And I think that's an issue where for some reason they must have thought that the first one was bigger than it was, and that they had the room to make this second one this much bigger. And I don't think it was there, right? There's no Kickboxer story that can't be told in 90 minutes, right? There's no reason. The first movie is 90 minutes, so there's no reason for us to have a 2-hour one. And I know people look at me and say, "Hey, Matt, you're too hung up on runtime." So it's funny. People say I'm too hung up on runtimes, but a lot of times when I am talking to other people on who do sites like mine, or write books like mine, books about movies that I review, they all say the same thing. Anytime you get past 90 minutes, I would always say 88 minutes, because that was the Roger Corman rule. Roger Corman's idea was that 88 was better than 90 because 88 was 11 reels, right? 8 minutes per film reel. So you don't have to get into that 12th reel if you keep it at 88 minutes. To me, 80 minutes is a fantastic movie. I mean, when 80 minutes is great, because it's like once you hit the 20-minute mark, you're like, oh, I've only got an hour left of this. I mean, that just feels fantastic. At Cinema Epic, they make a lot of their movies in like the 75-minute range. And while those movies can be a little bit all over the place, again, this movie did not need to be 2 hours. It did have some great moments to it. Again, Van Damme puts in another fantastic performance, and I really, really, really loved that. I was trying to think, in addition to that, there's one really great scene where Alain Moussi first gets into the prison, and it's almost like this big long one take where he's fighting, a bunch of guys. It's really not a one take though, right? Because there's a lot of cuts and stuff like that. But it's still kind of a long fight scene where he just goes through a bunch of guys, and that was really inspired. That I really liked there. So that one really. That was really good. That was maybe one of the best moments of the series, of all the films we've talked about. That might have been one of the best there. And I think the problem is the film just, at 2 hours, it's hard to keep up that kind of energy for 2 hours, right? And again, they felt like, oh, we got to do this really big fight scene at the end. There wasn't really anything to that fight scene at the end, again, and just except, people punching each other and spitting out Hawaiian Punch. You think of those end fights, you think of, some of the more iconic end fight scenes in these movies, right? You think of the first one with Van Damme fighting Tong Po. You think of Sasha Mitchell in the fourth one fighting Tong Po. Those two in particular were really, really well done. I think the Tong Po and the previous one was a solid one as well. I think Moussi and Bautista, that was a pretty good one as well. But this movie had some really good ones in here. This one, unfortunately, the end one didn't work as well as some of the other fight scenes, which was too bad. I'm curious to see what Armageddon. That's what the third one's going to be called, Armageddon. It lists a whole bunch of names in it that apart from this movie, but also from that are new to the movie. I'm curious. One of the things I read in the trivia, or I don't know where it was, somewhere maybe it was a news story, that they were hoping to get a waiver with despite the oh no, this was, I don't know if it's this year, but they were looking to maybe get a waiver from the strikes, I guess. I don't know what the plan is, but I don't know how that works, but either way, yeah. I mean, I don't even know how much I'm worried about this movie. I don't know what it's going to be. And again, right, we left the previous podcast with me saying why didn't people do more with Kickboxer? Why wasn't there more stuff done? And now I'm like, do I need a third one of these reboots? And maybe that's the problem, right? I think if we had gotten those Albert Pyun, Sasha Mitchell films, I think those would have been interesting because they would have carried on a story that the two of them were doing. I think if these movies if they had more connection to the previous series, as opposed to being reboots, I think that's a problem with a lot of things. Is just the whole idea of reboots, right? Everything's always rebooting. They're rebooting everything now. It's you got to always start things over, and if you're going to reboot something, you got to give us something new to it. It's got to be something special. It's got to be something that I can't get from the previous installments. And that's kind of not the case here. Even looking at part 5, yes, it was weird because it had Dacascos as a kickboxer when he's not a kickboxer. But by the same token, Dacascos' martial arts is just fantastic. And again, Moussi has great martial arts as well. But yeah, these movies, I don't know. When it got to this, I don't know. I'm just kind of keep spinning my wheels when really the issue is that this thing is too long, and that's really the issue with it. Now, as we wrap up here, I guess a few things to note. We were talking about Van Damme. So this is technically the only sequel, right, that he's appeared in, because again, the previous movie was not a sequel; it was a reboot. And so, obviously with the other Kickboxer films, he wasn't in those. There was an idea of him. Now, I say that's not true, right? In number 4, there was archive footage of him in part 4. But otherwise, right, he wasn't in those. So there's that piece there. In the end credits, we get everybody doing the Van Damme dance, which is fantastic there. That's one of my favorites, is obviously, probably one of the best parts of the whole series here is the Van Damme dance. And so to see everybody kind of paying homage to that was a good thing there, which I definitely appreciated. So I guess the question is, right, now that we've kind of gotten to this sort of end period here where we've looked at all of these, we've got, the initial 5 movies, right, that we had. The initial Kickboxer that Van Damme did, that was iconic. That's kind of one of his initial big 3 that kind of really makes him a huge star. You've got 3 sequels, right? There are 4 sequels that are direct to video. 3 that have Sasha Mitchell, a 4th one that has Mark Dacascos. We get nothing for 20 years, and then we get these reboots here. One that was kind of just your standard direct-to-video, Retaliation movie. Another one that should have been your standard prison forced to fight movie, but it ended up being 2 hours, almost 2 hours long, right? So it's kind of a bloated version of that, kind of like the baddie, the end baddie, who's big and bloated. We get a bloated version. So then where do we go from here? We know Pion had talked about potentially doing some sequels with Sasha Mitchell. I don't know if those can be picked up by somebody else. Dustin Ferguson was the one who did the 5th Nemesis movie with Pion as executive producer. Is he someone who could maybe pick up those movies and do them with Sasha Mitchell? If that's a track that they want to go down. Do they have the rights to use the Kickboxer name now that these reboots are being made, right? Or is that kind of off the table, and is it only these sequels, these reboot sequels that can be done? What is going to happen with this 3rd reboot sequel? Again, this is not a sequel that anybody's really... I don't know if anybody's clamoring for this sequel at this point here. And it's been 5 years already. And I don't know if maybe like the pandemic hurt the creation of it. I'm not sure exactly what caused the delays there. And it sounds like, I don't know. I don't know what did, all of that. It does sound like they're trying... I'm looking at the synopsis for that movie. Apparently it says that Sloan, reeling as his wife and child are mercilessly killed by an explosion that was meant for him. Filled with wrath, he runs the gauntlet through Malaysian underground fight circuit to track down the man responsible. So sounds like it could be like a Warriors version, right? Or what was it? Was it Ring of Fire 2 that played out like that? Of the John the Dragon Wilson films that kind of work that way. I don't know. That this could be an interesting one in that sense. It's doing it that way. Could be a darker one, kind of the way Kickboxer 4: The Aggressor was a darker one. And I think Moussi could go there. I think he could pull that off for sure. So I'm going to keep an open mind to this one if it does come out at some point. And of course we'll talk about it here, on the site. And I don't know if we'll talk about it on the podcast maybe as well. Maybe do an update. We'll see what happens there. But I think they're still kind of what I'm seeing here is that they're working on it. Right, they're getting close to something there. We'll see. We'll see what happens here. But yeah, I don't know. again, I don't know what this means about trying to get a waiver, if it has to do with the strike or what. But again, I don't know too. Like, can if it's not a SAG, if it's a SAG movie, right, with some of these actors in it, I don't know how you can start filming it if there's still going to be a strike in January, which there could still be. I don't know what happens, but we'll see what happens there. But I think in terms of a franchise look, kind of as we're wrapping this up here. This was definitely a different take from the Fast and Furious films. And it was nice to kind of be back and forth the way we were between, the theater and direct-to-video. I think even these two movies that did go in the theater, they made so little money that they really were direct-to-video movies as well, with like sort of these extremely limited theatrical releases. And again, I don't know that I would have bothered going to see them in the theater. There wasn't much for that. But anyway, just the same. I mean, these movies were not making, it wasn't like if these movies made $700 million, it was a bad movie for them, right? The way we were talking about the Fast and Furious films. I think there's some other aspects of these movies that I think kind of are more in my wheelhouse as someone who likes movies than the Fast and Furious movies. I think, from the actors involved, the directors. I mean, talking about Albert Pyun, one of my favorite directors, someone who I've personally, spoken with, which has been really cool. I'm not audibly, but more through correspondence, through email and messaging. Knowing that he had two of the movies in this, and two that I really liked out of it, especially Part 4. That was definitely a change. Van Damme himself. I think Van Damme is a very, very interesting figure. And the way we see him in these movies, where he starts off and creates the franchise really just by his own star power in the first movie. There wouldn't be other kickboxers if he hadn't done such a great job with that first movie. And through that momentum, you get 4 sequels that have varying degrees of success. And then, again, if it wasn't for him creating this franchise, there wouldn't have been any reason to reboot it either, right? Like, nobody would have wanted to reboot it. And granted, there are other films of his that they haven't rebooted yet. I think, Bloodsport hasn't been. And there was Lady Bloodsport that was kind of, or Lady Bloodfist. I can't remember. Yeah, the Amy Johnston film. That was one that was kind of, a remake, but not quite the same. But kind of that idea. What other ones? I mean, right, like Universal Soldier, he was a part of that sort of rebooting of that franchise. So, but again, he's created these things that exist well past him making the movies, and seeing him come back here and play the parts that he's played has been really cool. Another thing I think about Van Damme as we're sort of wrapping this up is that he's an actor who's gotten older, right? Of course, all of those big names have gotten older, and it's interesting because there's moments where he tries to fight it. You think of a movie like Pound of Flesh, where he's playing someone who was born in the 70s as opposed to somebody born in 1960 like he was, or 61. So he's playing someone like maybe 15 years younger in that movie. And I think he does that in a few. I think Kill 'Em All is another one where he's played somebody younger. But then you get movies like The Bouncer, right? Or you get movies like these Kickboxer sequels, where he's playing somebody older. He's playing the old wise man in a sense, and he's leaning into it and saying, "I want to do it." By the same token, he's showing that he's still got it, which I think is really cool too. That he's like, "I'm not going to let myself go. No matter how old I am, I'm going to keep pushing myself and keeping myself in shape." And he shows that in these movies as well, which I really liked. And he has an interesting legacy. We talked about it in the first movies, right? That there's sort of this arc with Van Damme where in the late 80s he's growing into this big phenomenon, right? That's somebody that we just really love seeing as an action star. And Bloodsport, Kickboxer, Lionheart, right? They all do play a big part in getting him there. And then you get those bigger budget ones. You get things like Double Impact, Hard Target, Death Warrant. It's a great one. Sudden Death, right? One of my favorites, of course, because it has hockey in it. But as Sudden Death comes, right, you start to see the wave cresting. And that's when you start to get things like Double Team, what he does with Dennis Rodman, which it was a theatrical movie. Again, I mentioned that I think in a previous episode that I took a date to see that movie. So I saw that one in the theater. One of the few Van Dammes I saw in the theater, but I have seen him in the theater. I mean, obviously the Street Fighter movie did not turn out the way I think he was expecting it to. It wasn't the franchise that I think he would have wanted it to be. And it's interesting because he's so averse to franchises, right? That he would never appear in his sequels. The only one that he did was like Universal Soldier Regeneration, or was it Regeneration or The Return, right? Universal The Return was the one he made in '99. But for the most part, I think he even sort of took pleasure in the fact that there were sequels made of his movies that he wasn't a part of. So there's that piece there, right? And then you get some really interesting sort of comeback movies for him. 2008, you get JCVD, which is just an absolutely kind of fantastic sort of character study, but somebody who's coming, reckoning with what his career has become and what it was before. It was such a fantastic performance. I don't know that anybody in that sort of 80s, 90s action mode could do something like that, but he does it. And it was just such an amazing film. I mean, I was thinking, like, from an Oscar standpoint, that he should have been nominated for Best Lead Actor Oscar for that. I don't know that he should have won, but a nomination, I think, would have been worthy of that performance. In 2012, he does Expendables 2, and I think he even says in JCVD that he didn't do the first Expendables because he didn't like the part that Stallone had for him. So he does Expendables 2, and completely steals the show in that. Turns in such a fantastic performance. Absolutely love that what he did there. And he kind of at that point, sort of kind of leans into being in that direct-to-video mode, and we get something like Enemies Closer, where he's a great baddie there. Talked about Pound of Flesh. And then here comes 2016, and he gets the opportunity to kind of to play the sensei character in the Kickboxer reboots. And does a really fantastic job with it. And I think, again, this is around that time in the mid to late 2010s where he's, 2018, he does The Bouncer. At the same time, he does Blackwater in 2018 with Dolph, which was a little bit of a disappointment there. So it wasn't like he was doing everything was working for him there. But yeah, I mean, The Bouncer is another one that's kind of along the lines of JCVD, where it's just really, really great performance on his part. Really kind of makes himself vulnerable, leans into being older, that I really liked. And I think you can put these two performances here, Kickboxer Vengeance and Kickboxer Retaliation, in there as really great performances on his part. That I think he does a really great job with those. And I don't think the movies, especially the second one, doesn't suffer because of him. Unless, he was executive producer. Maybe he was pushing for the film to be 2 hours, because he seems to like doing longer movies. I know Last Mercenary that he did that was on Netflix, I think that one was pushing 2 hours as well. Hour and 50 minutes. So another 111-minute movie. And so I think he kind of likes that kind of thing. And so, maybe we can blame him for this movie's length. But by the same token, he turns in such a really great performance. And, I think, for us who grew up in the 80s and into the 90s and grew up with Van Damme as such a big star, to, now ourselves, I'm reckoning myself with being in my mid-40s, and knowing that these guys are all getting older, I think to kind of see these performances like this, it is a little bit refreshing, because on the other hand, you get, someone like a Stallone who just, can't stop putting in the work on his face to like make himself look younger, keeps doing these parts, keeps holding on to these things. You get someone like a Seagal who just, constantly acts like he's younger than he is, doesn't want to come to terms with it. And then you get, sort of these other roles, Dolph is leaning into it a little bit more, and Van Damme here as well. So, I think for his legacy, these are movies that are going to help his legacy instead of hurt it. I think these Kickboxer movies, for whatever complaints that I have about the first one being, nothing special but a fun DTV actioner, or this second one being too old, Van Damme's performances in them were really solid and something that I really like. So maybe that's a good button to put on it here as we wrap up that, with Van Damme, sort of a withered Van Damme, we'll kind of see what he has for us coming up in the future here. I think he's winding down a little bit, not doing as many projects, but these were good projects that he did. And I think they were good as a result. So yeah, so I think this is a good place for us to leave it. So as we wrap up, again, my plugs, my novel, Chad in Accounting, also Girl in a Gun, and then Holtman Arms, all available on Amazon, both in paperback and in Kindle. So please pick those up if you get a chance. And the site, dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com, that's where you can find me. So yeah, so thank you everybody for listening, and we will wrap it up from here. Bye everyone.
girl.